Earlier this year, the Badge Bros taught me how to do hoops. The NBA dailies had a lot of fun venturing into that sport this year. And now I see everyone having fun with the MLB dailies, and I want in. I want in on the action. So John today is going to give me a 101 primer, everything I need to know to start drafting these MLB dailies. If you're like me, you've dabbled in other sports, but you want to get caught up to speed quickly here in the MLB streets, this is the show for you. I'm Pete with John. This is Off and On the Clock. Let's do it. All right, John, I saw you guys, Nez starting to dip his toes back into the content streets yesterday. Not going to be with us today, but sounds like he'll be joining us for Off and On the Clock in future weeks. And John, coming off a big night in the Deposit Kingdom across multiple sports there. The aforementioned Nez got the post-dad bump we all said was coming.
Yeah, dad strength Nez. Yeah, mad respect to him. Love it. He had 2 in the top 5 last night. So he won the main in the hoops there and then had 2 in the top 5. But whole community showed out last night. Maybe some of these principles are actually working now, Pete. Who knows here? But yeah, mad respect to Shilly won the daytime diamond there. Easy won the main NBA or main MLB slate there. Chris finished second in it and then scooped the drafting after dark or diamond after dark there with a first and a second. Just crazy to see from the community. Love it so much for them.
Yeah, and I mean, even just scanning the lobby, all kinds of contests going, a 3K to first, a 3-entry max, a little bone for the cash game king, almost like a double entry there, single entry. Basically whatever kind of contest you're looking for, it's there in the MLB lobby. And I am truly coming into this blind, which will shock no one who watched our Dinger shows, but I'm excited to kind of get some tips and tricks, and I have lots of questions for you. And I was kind of asking you an easy kind of dancing around this last week. Granted, season-long drafting versus daily is a little bit different, but just like how the sport plays out for a new person, whether, you need to be as projection focused as you are in NBA, if it's more of an art like it is in NFL. And those are kind of the questions I'm excited to get to the bottom of with you today.
Yeah, I mean, just to hit that right off the top, the pendulum swings far more artsy than it does in the projection late in space. Like last night, for instance, the Cubs were a lot of people's top stacks. We thought that A's ballpark was going to play well. We knew Joey Estes was a guy who could put runners on base and get hit hard, that sort of thing. But the art dynamic of it was scrolling the F down within your Cubs stacks and not just playing the same chalky 3 dudes who were getting drafted every single time. Like Chris's lineups, for instance, in the Diamond After Dark there had the 9-hole journeyman catcher, Carson Kelly, who wound up hitting for a cycle and scoring north of 40 fantasy points. And that's just something you don't get in NFL or NBA for that matter. Like yesterday in NBA, for instance, it was kind of like, well, your big scroll the F downs that could break the slate, who, if they come into more minutes, would be like D'Angelo Russell or Jordan Poole. Well, amongst the hoops community, those are household names. Carson Kelly, for instance, even amongst the baseball community, is like, you got to be deep in the weeds to know that he was once a time a prospect, then a failed guy, then a guy who basically had 300 at-bats a season for the last 8 years in a part-time role, and then just goes nuke last night from the 9-hole. So yeah, there's a lot more art than science in the baseball stuff, but over the entirety of a season, the science plays up for sure.
Okay, I like that. And this is what I'm going to do, guys. I'm going to be quite literally taking notes today. And so you guys get to just watch me take notes. If you guys are hardcore baseball people, maybe these concepts seem intuitive or obvious to you, but I get enough comments on these videos. Even after our Dinger show last week, someone said hopping in the Dinger drafts and the only knowledge I have is what was just discussed on this show. So this show is for people like me, or maybe you are a little rusty and you just want a refresher here from John as we go through. So we're starting out MLB more of an art than a science, and I can't type today. Let's see. The next question I have for you, John, is a very simple one here. And it's just, talk to me about like the timing of contests. Obviously with hoops and NFL, with inactives, with starting lineups. Like a lot of that dictates when we get information, when the advantages are to drafting early versus drafting late. Talk to me about how that plays out in MLB and when I need to draft if I want to be good at this.
It kind of does not matter in MLB. That's the beautiful thing. You can toss 5 lineups in at lock. You can draft the night before. ADP tends to be rather stagnant just in general. It'll be kind of like the same 10 dudes over and over again at the very top. It'll be your Otanis, your Judges, the guys you can draft every single day. Then what makes up the remainder of ADP is the chalk stacks that then start getting pushed up in tandem. So, for instance, Kyle Tucker, who's perennially going to be a top 10 pick, now all of a sudden his teammates get pushed up alongside him who wouldn't routinely be getting drafted on, a random Tuesday in a tough matchup, but will go every single time today because the Cubs are in another good spot in quotations. So in terms of like CLV, it kind of just doesn't exist. There is a little bit of CLV in terms of pitchers where, we kind of preach pitchers don't matter. Pitchers are, meaningless kind of deal. But that also being said, pitcher is a driving force to how we draft. So it's kind of like talking out of both sides of your mouth.
Well, that's the same as running backs, right? We say running backs don't matter, but running backs are like the foundation of any daily draft you do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's very, very similar in terms of that. Yeah, but just the CLV or the scared of combos or the scared of the GMs that exist, like that really doesn't exist, especially on an 11 game slate like we have today.
Okay. Talk to me about projections with MLB and kind of in tandem with that, like what is shaping ADP on Underdog with MLB contests?
One big difference with projection in baseball is results are binary outcomes, right? Like you can't have fractions of fantasy points like you can in football or basketball, where it's like, that guy getting 8 yards mattered. It's either you get a hit or you don't. You get a double or you don't. You score a run or you don't. So like being tethered to projection every single day is everyone's going to project within like 13 and 6 points. And in reality, someone's going to hit 29, 40, 38 fantasy points, that sort of thing. So we focus way less on projection and way more so on correlation patterns in terms of how those fantasy points can be scored tethered to other players in our lineup because, stacking is uncapped in our game. That's a big difference between any other sport.
And explain, like, obviously there's some intuitive reasons stacking makes sense in baseball, but for me, as someone who isn't like a baseball obsessive, some of them are maybe a little less intuitive. Explain why stacking is important in baseball.
Well, in short, because it's exponential, right? The game can play for infinity. There's no time on the clock. We saw it last night with the Cubs, where the other team literally waves the white flag when they're down 13-3. They put a position in player in there, and then Kyle Tucker hits another home run. This sort of deal, right? So the benefits of stacking are exponential. That being said, you do fall into patterns that other people are then falling into over and over again if you are stacking just the premium bats within said stacks. So for instance, on 11 game slate today, we'll have, some contrarian stacks that aren't getting drafted every single time, but will wind up becoming a little bit chalkier as the day goes on. For instance, the Giants are going to be one today where right-handed power just plays well in that ballpark, and Hayden Wisnowski gives up a shit ton of right-handed power. But what's going to happen is people are only going to draft, or in quotations, only going to draft Chapman, Adames, and Ramos over and over and over again. So even though the stack is contrarian by nature, they're repeating the same combo of the exact same stack over and over again because it's so easily to be obtained. So you have to be very disciplined in terms of, even getting unique within your stacking principles.
Do stacks get tethered based on like batting order? Obviously, if someone hits a grand slam, and the players in front of them or whatever, like then you're getting those runs. You're just getting a windfall from that cluster, because I assume like the stacking dynamics are stronger for players next to each other in the lineup than say like, I don't know, the 2-hole and the 7, or is that overthinking? Does that not matter?
No, that's spot on, Pete. That is 100% spot on. You know yourself some ball just by recognizing that. But that being said, the stacking benefits push even beyond that, because there can be an instance where the team's up by so much that now they're throwing middling relief pitchers who are not very talented comparative to throwing their really good guys if they were in like a 2 or 3 run game. So a hitter in the 2-hole can still benefit by a hitter in the 7-hole from like a macro standpoint. They just won't have that direct correlation of he hits bomb, he drives him in. So like the benefits of stacking get decreasingly beneficial the further the lineup spots are apart, but also there is still a slight bump comparative to insert random bat from another team.
And that another analogy or tie into NFL would be like, obviously you have the quarterback wide receiver where that connection is so obvious. When a touchdown is scored, they're both creating points in that play. But there's also the team level benefits of like, oh, the running back is probably going to have more opportunities if the offensive scoring and the offense is humming, even though it's not a play-by-play correlation specifically.
Exactly.
Okay. So what percentage of winning lineups in MLB do feature this kind of heavy team level correlation? Because one thing we saw in NFL dailies this year is, there were some skinny stacks, but you could win without any correlation. There were multiple weeks where the top prize had 0 correlation within the game, within the team. Is that even possible in MLB, or is this just always going to rule the top of the leaderboard?
No, it's definitely possible. We see lineups win all the time with like the 5 best one-offs and people just plucking, 5 amazing hitters and they all go yard that day or whatever. Now, from a macro standpoint, like just going back to the data and stuff that we have, I'll kind of list it in reverse order of like likelihood. Let's use, because slate size does really matter in this conversation, Pete, that like, on a 2 or 3 game slate, correlation plays up even higher than on an 11 game slate, for instance, just because it's far more likely that individual bats will go nuke opposed to an entire lineup going nuke on 11 game slate. Whereas on like a 2 or 3 game slate, only one team needs to pop off, and it's most likely that only one team pops off in there. But just in terms of like the way in which you kind of build from like a macro principle, your 3-1-1s, so 3 stacked hitters and 2 one-offs. The 3-2, the 4-1, and the 5-0 are kind of like what people tend to gravitate towards. And actually last year, the most success was shown by the 3-1-1, which was a little bit counterintuitive to what I thought the 3-2 would show a better, EV, but it did not. So 3-1-1, 3-2, the 4-1, and then the 5-0. So last night, Easy's winning lineup was a 4-1, for instance. He takes a premium hitter, stacks 3 other guys with him, and then takes another one-off bat that he likes, and he punted pitcher. Entirely reasonable and intelligent strategy.
Explain like one thing that, and again, it's just easier for me to tie things back to NFL to understand this stuff. But like one thing that I always think about for NFL stuff is like the studs at the top, and tell me if this is similar with the best hitters. Like they can kind of get there in any game environment. Like Nico Collins can pop off even if the Texans offense is sluggish. And the things I care about for stacking are more on the back half, like the fringier players, like, hey, they're going to need to get in a crazy game, or their quarterback is going to have a surprise game. Does that follow with MLB? Because kind of the way you're saying, it's almost maybe opposite, where it's like if a marquee hitter is going yard or having a big game, like he's naturally going to rise the tide of the rest of his teammates. And you actually want to be going around stacking your top player.
Yes and no. I mean, you can find the equivalent of Nico Collins' talent in the 6th round in baseball, just because the player pool is so deep and there's so many guys. So yesterday, for instance, like Jose Ramirez, he was getting drafted in, 8th overall in the Dinger. Yesterday in the daily contest, he was a 32 ADP. So that would be your equivalent of like Nico Collins being available there. So just dealing with how many plentiful bats there are and stuff like that. The studs you don't necessarily have to build around when they're in bad spots. So using them as like a one-off in a tough situation, because we don't think the whole lineup. I think the Dodgers are a good example of this tonight. Like Atlanta is really scuffling right now. They've only scored 2 runs in the last 3 games. And they have Chris Sale, who is the NL Cy Young winner from last year, pitching tonight in Dodger Stadium. That doesn't change the fact that Shohei Ohtani is going second overall in every single draft. Basically, as far as he can fall is like 4 kind of deal. Because even though it's lefty-lefty, even though it was the best pitcher in the National League last year, he's still Shohei Ohtani. Now, if you look at some models, he's probably going to project, 8th or 10th best. But that being said, in our contest, he's always going to go in kind of like that top 3. I wouldn't advocate to fade him this evening, but I also wouldn't advocate to build Dodgers around him this evening. If you want to do a skinny stack of just 2 guys with it and put Teoscar Hernandez, who hits lefties pretty well and homered last night, adjacent to him, absolutely go by all means. But there's a classic, like just, well, it's baseball kind of like throw your hands up to a lot of this. So I would advocate for in that instance, advocate for Ohtani as a one-off and then stacking another game because you want, a contrarian stack to pop off, not necessarily Dodgers' likelihood of popping off.
With like, how much of the field is already doing stacks like that? You mentioned you'll still see a lot of people doing like one-offs and such. And then on top of that, how much does that lead to duplicated or if not semi-duplicated lineups where it's like, hey, they have 4 of the same stack as I do, and I'm basically just playing a 1v1 versus a bunch of other lineups?
Yeah, I was really concerned about that with the Cubs last night, and it didn't turn out to matter. So I found myself gravitating to the A's side of the game instead to be slightly more contrarian there. I think the way in which that happens is if you do it in a chalk fashion, in quotations, by using SP1 on the slate and then doing hitters 1 through 5 of a team that all has like 25 plus ADPs, because it's easily repeated over and over and over again. In that instance, if you want to do something like that, maybe use the SP2 or the SP3 on the slate instead of using the 101, because that's where you'll fall into paths of duplication.
How like sticky in MLB is recent performance? Like the equivalent, like in NFL, right? If a running back is seeing their touches increase slowly week over week, or a wide receiver's targets, it's like there's probably some signal to that. Their role is expanding. Obviously, these batters they're just in the lineup. They're probably going to get about the same amount of at-bats as they normally would. Are you looking at recent performance to be like, oh, I want to get ahead of this? Or is there just like no signal to that? It's super streaky.
It really depends on the profile of the hitter. We can use Eugenio Suarez as an example, who homered 3 times in the opening weekend. He last year didn't homer until like the first week of May or something, second or third week of May. He is a renowned slow starter and or extremely streaky hitter where his home runs come in bunches. We saw it at the tail end of last year, and now we're seeing it at the start of this year. So if there's a little bit of historical data to indicate that this player's play style is streaky, then I'll weight it in a little bit more. The stuff that I care more about in terms of recency bias than historical is macro team trends, where guys are hitting in the lineup. Is this team showing a propensity to run more this year? Do they pinch hit more than we are accustomed to seeing? Ballpark factors, catching on to trends early in ballpark factors. Like last year, for instance, we caught on to the fact that balls were flying to right field for Cleveland and for San Diego, which were traditionally tough parks to hit in. But now all of a sudden they introduced some seats and they shifted up the wind patterns, and we had wind tunnels out to right field in both those ballparks. The equivalent of that this year is getting to know the Rays Stadium and getting to know the Athletics Stadium. And the first game that was played in the Athletics Stadium last night, there was a ball hit that resulted in a home run that wouldn't have been a home run in any other park in all of baseball. So getting ahead of some of those macro trends, those are the recency bias things I'm leaning into. less so than like this dude's hot. And the reason for that is, as you outlined at the start there, is opportunity share. Because no matter how hot a guy is, we're not going to force feed him more touches. We're not going to give him more targets. He's only going to get 3.6 at bats on average if he's hitting in the upper third of the lineup.
So how would you, like, comparing it to, say, NBA and NFL, how efficient is the ADP? And I guess another part to that question is, I'm guessing people deviate from ADP way more in MLB than they do in the other sports.
Yes, very much so. Like ADP is almost irrelevant outside of starting pitcher number 1 and 2 and the top kind of like 5 hitters. It's get your stacks, it's get guys that you think are good matchups, because I always love to use this example. Mike Trout, he is future Hall of Famer, one of the greatest hitters of our generation, multiple time MVP. There was a hitter who was a pinch hitter who only ever played against lefties named Patrick Wisdom. Pete, his ISO versus lefties was the exact same as Mike Trout. And like that doesn't happen in football. That doesn't happen in other sports where you get a guy in a spot where on paper he looks like Mike Trout, but he's like only getting 250 at bats a year. He's a off the bench guy. And this is all because of handedness, splits, weather, which we haven't even talked about yet, and historical matchups. So yeah, it's very interesting. I think what kind of like doubles down on this notion is Timmy Carr's chat notification there that says he just saw Mike Trout, Yordan Alvarez, and J-Rod go undrafted in a main contest. Those are 3 picks that were going in the first 2 rounds of the Dinger, and those are 3 of the top 15 best players in all of baseball when they're healthy. And they just routinely go undrafted in here because people are finding spots they like more, they're finding stacks they like more, yada yada.
Right. And it's almost kind of analogous to playoff best ball strategy in that, like, once you make a couple decisions on your team, like a bunch of the player pool just ceases to exist, or should cease to exist for you, because they just don't make sense. They don't help what you're trying to do. And it sounds like that dynamic's more extreme with MLB dailies than the other ones.
Absolutely. Like Easy talked about it on our show when we did the season long thing, that the stacking benefits in his data, he thought it was about a 25% increase of like, rising tide lifts all ships, of when you have a stacked hitter, you should then boost in terms of correlation another hitter's projection by about 25%. That's even more magnified when it comes to daily contests because the correlation is realized instantaneously, not over the entirety of a season.
So then does that mean with MLB dailies, you're off? And this is kind of how I approach my NFL daily portfolio, where I like to kind of sketch out the exposures I want and then go in and get them. Obviously, I'm letting like the top of the draft come to me, but it sounds like with MLB, outside of maybe some rare combos or a faller, like you kind of go into a draft knowing what you want to do as opposed to letting the draft come to you.
Absolutely. Yeah, very much so. The only time in which I'll let the draft come to me is if someone else snakes a starting stack that I wanted, or they snake a starting pitcher that I wanted to be tethered to said stack, and then I kind of have to deviate and find a new way there. But the beautiful thing about baseball is when you're hand building, there's always an out. Like there is always an out. It might not be, as clean as, hitters 1, 2, 3 on the contrarian stack you wanted, but now all of a sudden, you're just doing 5, 6, 8. Like I can hat tip members in the community who come in here and auto draft, five straight from the team and push the plane and move on to their next draft because they instantly allow me to get contrarian by chasing the same stack as them. Whereas I would find a really hard time clicking the button on the 6th player in the Nationals lineup who's going to be owned 5 times this evening. I would have a very hard time doing that. But if I'm in the same lobby as Jay Witz, for instance, who comes in there and just goes auto draft all 5 Nationals, bats 1 through 5, now all of a sudden, okay, this is probably a good time for me to, fight him for a stack because it'll instantly allow me to get contrarian from my builds.
Yeah. And this was going to be my next comment, but it sounds like auto drafting in MLB is nearly impossible in the dailies.
I think if you had a big enough bankroll and you did it over a macro and you know, hand picked the spots you wanted to get to and did all the work behind the scenes and then came in and just loaded cues and did it, I think it could probably be profitable, but not nearly to the extent of live reacting to what's going on in the room. Because there are rooms where it's like you the Dodgers stack is basically never obtainable. But if you're in a room where, four guys are pushing the plane in front of you, like you literally just have to build Dodgers because it'll be your only chance to all day long, right? Because pairing ADP 1, 6, and 9, even though it's rare, or even though it's not that rare for ADPs to fall in baseball, the combinatorial ownership of all three of those is going to be low enough in a 5,000 person contest that you just like have to be on the clock taking that when it happens.
I probably know the answer to this question I'm about to ask you because I'm asking John Warner, but do you find yourself getting really overweight on some of the contrarian stacks, or do you still like to seek out some of the, on paper stacks that look good as part of your daily portfolio?
I mean, this is the origins of the scroll the F down. Like last night, for instance, when even though the Cubs looked really good on paper, I'm just not going to win when the chalk stack gets home. So I'm a big time scroller, and even within like if I did eat the chalk on some of those Cubs stacks or something like that, I would deviate in a decent way by tacking on two contrarian one offs that I like, or a contrarian 2-man stack that I like. I am a big time quote unquote low volume, high variance player when it comes to baseball, where it's like I feel very comfortable in my ability to look at a slate, see what's going on, see where the field, and mentally project where the field is going, and then build 25 contrarian lineups for that evening. Now the outcomes of that are high variance and binary, but that's my favorite approach to baseball, knowing that I'm not going to 144 every night.
So other than watching Badge Bros breakdowns, tell me where a good place for me to start for a slate specific research would be, because obviously with like NFL and NBA, like I'm always starting with projections as some sort of baseline to help me have opinions about ADP, knowing where I want to deviate, like you said, knowing where the field's overconfident. But it sounds like with MLB, projections probably aren't a starting point. And to that point, are people uploading ranks, or is everyone kind of really working off of ADP?
I think some people are uploading ranks. You could tell who the Bad X Cardi guys are, and they'll upload the ranks because there's very noticeable hitters that will be popping on a given day. For instance, he had O'Neal Cruz as his 101, I guess 2 or 3 slates ago, and he had an ADP of 28 on our site. And then all of a sudden he starts going in the first round, and it's like, oh, there's the Cardi Bros, that sort of deal.
Are those direct uploadable ranks, or people are taking that and then massaging that into their own uploadable?
Massage and then bring it onto the site. There's no direct downloadable or uploadable, rather ranks. In terms of resources, I mean, like Cardi's always been the gold standard for just something to look at. Some people will look at it but not want to look. I guess I should start with the 101. The 101 is weather, Pete, because unlike any other sport, we talk about the way that football, it's overblown. Like weather concerns are mitigated. Like we don't care about the wind, and it has to be over 30 miles an hour to actually affect throws and stuff like that. In baseball, like we're talking like 5 miles per hour can matter in a big way. 10, 15 degrees can matter in a big way, because we're going to juxtapose games that are played in AAA ballparks at 70 or 80 degrees today with games that are played in big league ballparks that are pitcher friendly, that are played in 40-degree temperatures today. So the equivalent of the dome boner on any given day is weather, and it doesn't necessarily have to come in the form of a dome. Actually, it's better to not come in the form of a dome. So that's kind of like your 101 resource. It's free to look at all of Roth's stuff, his Twitter, his Roto Grinders. The 101 will be weather and ballparks there. As far as projections, it's probably like the 9th thing that I look at.
Wow.
I like to formulate my own opinions, formulate my own stacks, because when you look at game totals, you look at spreads, you look at all that sort of stuff for NFL, it's pretty concrete, right? No matter where you look, a team's implied total will be within a point or two. The spread will be within a half point. The money line decimal odds will be within fractions of points, right? With baseball, depending what your inputs are in your model, the implied run totals can skew like 2+ runs from source to source. So if you're looking at Ballpark Pal over here, you're looking at Cardi over here, you're looking at all the books on Unabated over here, run lines can skew like north of 2, pending what the inputs are, how much you're weighting weather, how much you're weighting historical data versus recency data from the pitcher standpoint. So it's a long-winded way of saying you can play whoever the fuck you want in MLB because you can always find a reason. So it's in terms of research, the projection models are probably like maybe ninth was harsh, maybe fourth or fifth on my list of resources to go down.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So I look at I assume the first thing I'm pulling up ADP. I'm kind of getting a lay of the land, what's popular right now. I want to check in on weather and ballparks, look for favorable spots. And then are you kind of starting now to pre-plan some of your stacks of like, hey, everyone's off of this. Are you using kind of the ADP again to guide you of like, hey, these guys after pick 30 are rarely getting drafted? How are you kind of starting to formulate what you want? Say, like you said, you're doing 25 drafts. At what point do you know, like, hey, these are kind of the 25 types of stacks I want to make?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually prefer to look at ADP a little bit lower down. Next up, I would kind of look at, roster resource and some of the lineups that I'm anticipating coming out today. And then what those lineups, you look at that in tandem with Underdog's MLB, where they'll tweet out every live lineup once it happens. They do now appear in the app as well, mitigating some of the edge of the past that we might have had where people were drafting guys who were out of the lineup. But yeah, I like to find like some matchups that I like just in terms of handedness of pitcher and splits of pitcher juxtaposed to lineups I think are going to get ran out there today. And then I like to, okay, these are kind of like my 5 teams or stacks that I would be most interested in. Then go to ADP and go, oh, damn. Yep. Everybody sees the same thing I see today with that one. Okay. That's a chalk stack. Okay, cool. And then start to deviate based off of what I see from ADP later, opposed to checking at ADP right away.
Are these the green check marks just means they've been confirmed the starting pitcher?
Correct. Yeah, they can be a little misleading every now and then where a pitcher happens to, or a team happens to utilize an opener. That's the only instance in which the green check can get a little confusing. You just have to know which guys are fully stretched out starters versus which are 1 inning guys, because quality starts and wins play such a huge factor in our scoring on this site that you have to know who are the likely ones to go, 5 and 6 innings.
And what are the outside of pitcher? What are the positional requirements?
There are 5 that you can apply as you see fit: 2 infield, 2 outfield, and a flex.
Okay. But everyone has to draft 1 pitcher?
Yes.
And so then when you were talking about the stacks, like at those mostly adding up to 5, it's like a pitcher because that's going to be uncorrelated. And then the 5 hitters are the ones you're generally thinking about correlation around.
Yeah. There are slight benefits to correlation in pitcher, but they are very, very marginal. Where it's like, if your offense is going nuke, yeah, said pitcher is more likely to obtain a win. That being said, the pitcher is also less likely to go deeper in the ball game if their offense has gone heavy. So if their offense is up, 9-0 after the first 4 innings, well, there's no reason to push your starter. We can use some of our average relievers after that to get through this, because we're most likely not going to give up 9 in the opposite direction. So there's reason for him not to pitch as long, but you get a little bit of correlation in terms of the win bonus.
And I've heard inverse correlation discussed as like a Galbrain theory of saying, look at the top pitcher today, which is Logan Gilbert, and stacking up the hitters opposite him, with the thought being those players are going to be valued less because people are so worried that the pitcher is going to have an awesome outing?
Yeah, that is what we refer to as the double bubble leverage, where it's like
Ooh.
you get two birds with one stone there with the double bubble. It's you knock out 1/6 of the player pool by stacking against the chalk pitcher, because now this pitcher cannot separate, and you double down on that notion by having a super contrarian, the oftentimes most contrarian available stack there. Obviously plays better on, kind of like 8-9 ish game slates. The short slates, not as much so, because you have to basically make some concerted decisions to stack against pitchers because they're all going to be owned and all the teams are going to be owned. So for instance, today plays pretty well for something like that. That being said, would not advocate for stacking Detroit against Logan Gilbert today.
Yeah, I was going to say, because I just pulled this up. I mean, this looks like a contrarian dream. The highest ADP here is a 35.7, which I assume means is like just not getting drafted whatsoever. You could just rip off 4 of these, log out. I think I have to draft one of these teams today, but you just told me I shouldn't.
I mean, they do have some isolated power, and they did score 9 runs last night. So there's no reason don't let me say no, because you could play anyone you want in baseball and it will definitely be contrarian. There's also some good left-handed power at the top of that lineup in Kerry Carpenter, aka Kerry Bonds, Riley Green, and Colt Keith there. So if you want to do a little contrarian 3-man Detroit, you're certainly going to be unique, but it is one of the hardest ballparks on planet Earth to hit in. And Logan Gilbert is stone cold chalk on redacted to the notion of about 70% on an 11 gamer because of his way to separate this evening comparative. He is just one of the best pitchers in baseball, especially at home, and he's been flashing in a big way. That being said, with the scoring format of our site, he is not a must to be getting to over and over again. But in terms of like VORP calculation today, I talked about it a little bit yesterday with Tyler Glasnow, a very similar setup to yesterday, where it's like, you don't want to just not wave pitcher today because it's never pitcher. Logan Gilbert can spin it, and he's going to be a guy you want some exposure to today.
I say we hop in a couple drafts, and I feel like I have a good foundation for some of these concepts, and now you can kind of walk me through how this would play out in practice. The Turn Tuesday, this is the biggest contest on the site for today.
That is the main contest for today. Yeah.
And when do these normally, does the lock time? Oh yeah, this is do these normally lock this late, or is there a pretty wide fluctuation on lock times?
There's wide fluctuation on lock time pending slates. So yesterday, for instance, there was day games mixed in. Tuesdays and Thursdays, traditionally speaking, not a ton of day games unless there's like one getaway day for a team there. So, the 4:05 Eastern is kind of like your standard, 7:05 Eastern, 4:05 my time is kind of your standard lock time, similar to hoops. But those are on the days in which there aren't day games. That's when you'll get, a mini slate before a big slate, and then you'll get the two, 10 o'clocks and 10:05s on an after dark slate.
All right. So talk to me through like how I should start thinking about an individual draft, because we did mention how you can essentially go in pre-planning. We didn't actually go through individual spots you really like on today's slate. But in general, in round 1, are you taking the best by ADP, or are you just going and getting a guy you have a strong lean on?
I would say in 70% of my drafts, I'm taking one of the top 4 hitters, something like that,
Yeah.
trying to get one of the highest projected. And then I will either decide to build a stack around it or decide to build a contrarian stack after. But if you wanted to take Logan Gilbert and be like, he separates at pitcher today, then we take 3, whatever Chicago bats that don't include Kyle Tucker, and then you take 2 contrarian one-offs. I mean, I wouldn't fault you. Anything's on the table in baseball. That's the beauty of it.
Well, I'm glad Logan Gilbert goes, because my strategy today is going to be stacking up all of those 35.7 ADPs against him. So, looks like we'll get either Kyle Tucker, which seems rare here, or Ohtani. Who I heard is like the Travis Hunter of baseball. Is that what? Oh no, okay, he goes.
I'd take Kyle Tucker. He is my highest projected individual hitter today, even above Aaron Judge. He was my highest projected hitter yesterday as well. I think that ballpark is just so nice. It's something we talked about all Dinger season.
Are we star methoding it? Do you go to CHC and you're starting to add some of these guys? What do we do here next?
We can star method for sure, or you can take another stick that you like. I think Vlad is a really good one-off today. I think Ketel Marte is a really good one-off today. But if you want to go double contrarian stacks, pick one of those Chicago bats. Pick your favorite. Pick Swanson.
Swanson?
I'll tell you why after.
Okay.
Pick Swanson, and we'll build ourselves out a 3-2 here, and then find a pitcher that we like, because then we can do your 3 Detroit bats and have 2 outfielder slots left for the Detroit lefties.
So question for you, because you said, like, when we were talking, like, you can kind of, because of the strong correlation benefits, you can kind of throw out ADP. You can do what we did. Like, how common is this for someone to just jump from 8 to 29 here versus like people snap picking the next guys in ADP right after us?
Basically every single draft. At least one person in the room will be doing what we're doing right now.
And everyone else will kind of be more in line, at least for the top half of their draft, and then they'll start to deviate?
Not necessarily. Yeah, not necessarily. There's a lot of drafts, like as indicated in the chat earlier, that like, Jordan and Trout and these guys go undrafted like all the time. There's definitely some chalk, stuff that formulates, right? But there you go. That, like, the notion I was saying, like that Chapman and Adames there, like, it's going to appear contrarian to people, but that one's going to be owned a shit ton today. That was my initial read when I was looking at the slate, just because of everyone seeing what I see with Hayden Wisnowski versus right-handed power, plus, a good place to hit for right-handed power.
And then would the hope of this drafter be, because those are pretty low 80, or we'll make our pick here. Where would you direct me? We got 2 Chicago hitters so far.
I think you got to do your Detroit thing. You got to stick to your guns here, Pete. Yeah, you got to do your Tigers thing. I think Kerry Carpenter is the best of the bunch. I do think another macro one that we always look at is who was used in the bullpen the day before, and Seattle did use some of their lefties for extended innings yesterday, so less likely that he's going to get a lefty-lefty matchup and pinch hit for there. I do have Vlad as like my 5th highest hitter on the slate, like just in general, if you wanted to mix in a one-off, but I think you want to stick to your guns here with this Detroit notion and add Riley Green to this.
Okay. And so why are we doing, or talk to me through, like, what do you think? Obviously we're going to get a pitcher and then we have one more. Are you saying go 2 Chicago, 3 Detroit would be our play?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, or vice versa if you want to scroll at Chicago, but just knowing that Detroit is the more contrarian of the two and you wanted that little double bubble leverage there, by all means.
And so, if you were building, it doesn't sound like you have as much conviction as me in this Detroit play, but if you did, say you thought this was like, would you be willing to build out 25 different, or how many different, double bubble stack versions would you build out if you thought it was like a really strong play?
On the 11 gamers, like if I was playing 25 entries, I would kind of cap myself at 5, even if I thought it was like, even if I think like the Athletics are super good as a contrarian stack today, or even if I think Detroit is, just knowing how many entries I'm going to have relative to what I would do. Now, if I knew I was going to 150 it, then I mean, you'll see it all the time in redacted baseball where people will 150 and they'll have, 25, 50, 25, and 50 of like stacks. And like 50 of their lineups will contain variations of the same team, 5-mans, if that makes sense. Yeah. So like, that's where like the Opto Bros and the 150 Maxers in like redacted MLB is a little different than us as hand drafters. Yeah.
So, Consigliere mentioned the pitcher, Shane Baz is nice there. He falls all the way to 27. Why wouldn't we lock up a better pitcher knowing no one else is going to be trying to grab my Detroit guys?
Largely because I don't like Shane Boss today.
Okay. Okay.
I'm scared of the pitch count. We got to go infield here, Pete, or you
Okay.
can go starting pitcher.
All right. Let's get our pitcher so we have a few more seconds.
Go ahead and take Webb.
Okay. And is really the only thing you're looking for is just making sure you're not opposite of any of your hitters is really the only no-no?
Opposite your hitters, the ability to go deep from a pitch count standpoint in the ball games, and K rates. K rates are floor. That's basically why people pay up for pitcher, is because K rates are floor. Now Webb he checks two of those boxes where he's a professional ass pitcher, keeps the ball on the ground. He's a guy that will go deep into ball games, especially early in the season. But yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And so I didn't, yeah. So we do, like you said, have to go infield, which then that doesn't make the Chicago options look as good. Or,
yeah,
or does it matter?
Colt Keith or Torque, either or. Keith has the handedness advantage. Michael Busch is nice too. Left hand handedness advantage. But I am Luis Severino respector, despite the ballpark. So I think the contrarian leverage here is to go with Torque.
Torque. Okay. And I mean, in a way, it kind of makes sense. Like if you're going to make a big contrarian stand like this, like you might as well lean into it as opposed to making it the smaller part of your stack.
Absolutely.
Okay.
If we're leaning into the notion that Detroit is the double bubble that we need, this is a binary outcome team here, Pete, where this is going to finish in the top 10 if that stack goes nuke, or it's going to finish in the bottom third.
Let me know how impactful are the positional designations? Are there runs like is outfield or infield more plentiful than the other in the dailies? I'm just trying to think through how you should prioritize that if you are deciding, do I take the infielder or outfielder first?
Yeah, it's relatively balanced in general there, because DHs do fall into the outfield category. So on 11 gamer, like you could still find guys that you like even looking at this right now, like Jose Ramirez as a 19 overall, went undrafted. He's a great baseball player who homered yesterday. Julio Rodriguez is a monster. James Wood is one of my favorite home run picks of the day. He went undrafted here. So like there's plentiful at every position, where scarcity doesn't matter as much when it's an 11 game slate like this. Now in terms of, stackability, the Athletics, their top 4 of their top 5 hitters in the lineup are going to be outfielders. So now you have to be cognizant of that when you're building your stacks. Same with the Cubs. 3 of their top 4 hitters in the lineup are going to be outfielders. So they pair better with a team that is infield heavy, where like the Rays top 5 hitters are all infield designation. So now Rays plus Oakland or Rays plus Cubs pair pretty well together, that sort of thing. So I think it's mentally allocating positional designation in pairing stacks more so than it is scarcity.
Are there any, like, looking at ADP, any stacks you see here where you're just like, I'm just not going to mess with that? Like they're priced up. Everyone's going to have them. Like, what are you looking for to spot those?
Usually it will be like recency bias stuff, or like a quote unquote hot hitter who is propped up because of his stackability. Those will be kind of guys that I'll be soft fading. Yesterday, it was a little bit Cubs, where it was like they were just so priced up and people were fighting over them so much that I just didn't want to join the fight there. But yeah, in general, like ADP is just so fluid that it's like I'm really comfortable taking whoever. I guess Arizona today, for instance, where like Arizona's been hot. Arizona's going to Yankee Stadium. Ball's been flying at Yankee Stadium. We want to get over on some of these lefties like Ketel Marte and Josh Naylor. They feel like good picks to click. But if everybody's going to have an Arizona stack every single draft, like I'll just take my chances on the 21 other teams on the slate, right? So I'll definitely have a one-off or two, or like the occasional like skinny stack, but I don't know. Will Warren might be okay on the mound on the other side, and I'll just go ahead and find a stack that projects similarly in my model or in my mind, deeper than these other ones.
What about the other kind of way of playing it and saying, all right, people like this spot, but they're overconfident in where the points are going to come. I'm going to scroll down to these Arizona guys after pick 35. So I'm looking at Pavin Smith, Alec Thomas. Is that an angle you'd take?
Absolutely. I mean, some of those profiles will be pinch hit risk guys and be platoon guys. So as soon as the righty gets
which means
pulled,
that they would have less at bats than the others. Okay.
Yeah, and in some instances, less being like they would literally just have two, versus the starter. Even if things broke right for the lineup, they would still potentially get pinch hit for. Yeah, so that's one thing I'd be scared of with going like the contrarian side of that. But the first thing you'll notice when you run the S words for redacted, if you run the S words like Easy's been running in his sheet, is there's an implied team total of like, 6.5 runs or whatever for a given lineup. The way in which those runs are scored will change ad nauseum the more frequently you run the S words. And that's why you kind of want to harp on like 5 stacks that you're really interested in, and then build them in like different manners over and over and over again, comparative to trying to get a little bit of everyone in the chalky fashion.
How, like, if you do start to want, like, how would I have ever have known that these guys are pinch hit risk? How do you get that far down into understanding these profiles and their, because obviously there's guys who are more talented than others. I think that goes without saying, but how do you, it seems like the most important thing is just knowing opportunity. Like, hey, they're going to get the same amount of at bats as these other guys.
Yeah, that therein lies the ball knowing and following the trends of like roster resource, for instance. Roster resource can be a really good. I can kind of give you like a blanket rule. Like blanket rule of thumbs are like the Twins, the Rays, the Giants, the outfielders of the Reds. Yeah, like those are kind of like these fringe in quotation, middling, trying to contend lineups tend to be very platoon heavy. Those teams in particular, and they'll do the mixing and matching kind of thing more frequently. So it's managerial trends. It would be the equivalent of being like Arthur Smith's gonna go to Najee Harris over Jalen Warren at the goal line, and it's like, why do I know that? We just fucking know it, man. Like it's just
gotcha.
Yeah.
There you go. We need a coach speak index for MLB as well. Let's do another one here. And maybe we can go ahead.
Sorry to cut you off. I didn't mean to cut you off. I got excited. Davis said that the bat does have pinch hit probability in it, which if you are looking at models can be very helpful. So he's saying never click Larnach or Wallner there, because they are 2 big time pinch hit risks for the Twins.
And I assume someone who's a pinch hit risk just isn't as good of a hitter there. So it's like you're having to hit a 2-leg parlay. 1, they get the at bats, and 2, they're actually good that day.
It's interesting because or they're extremely good one way and not the other. So Kerry Carpenter, for instance, who we took in that last draft, he rarely starts against lefties, but he's one of the best hitters in all of baseball against right-handed pitching. So it's very weird how the handedness plays. Now, we can go open up another can of worms and go down it eventually, too, with guys who are reverse splits or pitchers that are then reverse splitsy as well, where, a righty is supposed to be better against a righty in terms of a pitcher, but that's not always the case. There are isolated pitchers who, feature a changeup more frequently than something else, and that only plays well against lefties instead against righties. So the ball knower angle of gutting down platoons and splits is extreme.
And how much of that? Because I feel like with NFL, a lot of when you're getting into splits and all of that stuff, it's just so baked into ADP. Like it's really hard to pull a fast one over, like have hidden knowledge. But it sounds like with MLB, there's just too many factors for it to be fully baked in.
Yes and no. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So
I
here,
want
here
the
comes.
John. You catered to my extreme contrarian leans the first draft, so let's get the John experience. I'll just co-pilot this one with you.
Okay. Let's take Logan Gilbert. I think I'm not I don't have the propensity to take pitcher early all that often, but when I do think he can separate on a slate, and there's a lot of other guys who could get shelled today, I do want to go ahead and do something like that. Yeah, there's also like what Davis is saying in the chat now. It's like reverse splits aren't even real. Like there is some pushback in the analytical community for that sort of notion as well. So hitting reverse splits might not be real, but pitching reverse splits are a little stickier. So there's still a lot of unsolved things about baseball, which are like pretty cool as well.
And you going pitcher here, it sounds like the perfect storm for you, right? Like if you're going to be building out kind of under owned stacks and you think there's a pitcher who's going to separate, it sounds like you would skew a lot of your portfolio to just taking that early pitcher because there's basically no opportunity cost for you if that's how you see the slate.
Yeah, it's a delicate line to walk though, because then you end up overweight with a pitcher, which is not necessarily the best thing in the world, even if we think he's in a good spot, because he's still going to fail like 38% of the time, right? So, yeah, so it's a delicate way to walk, and that's why I said when you build the 5-man stacks to not do it this way, because that's how everybody feels and that's how everybody will do it. Is that let's just do 5 nationals right now, that sort of thing. Let's take James Wood here. I like James Wood's. Jose Barrios has dealt with power issues from lefties. That's how I would phrase it. So I do like James Wood in a vacuum today as a pick to click. Maybe we could skinny stack it with one other guy, or we could take another contrarian bat and then tack on a contrarian stack as well.
Sounds good. I want to be able to win the slate on 2 lineups. So either Logan Gilbert crushes or he gets, as you might say, shelled by those Detroit guys that I scrolled down for. So this will work out well.
The only thing you don't want in the world right now is like Detroit putting up like 4 runs in the first 5 innings and that's it. Like that's the nut low.
Because then he gets pulled and okay, gotcha.
Yeah, that's the middle ground. Brandon Lowe went there. That's unfortunate for us. Let's take CJ Abrams.
Okay.
Do a little left-handed stack at the top of the order there. It is a little bit of recency bias here, seeing as though they both homered yesterday, but I actually think today's spot is better for them than yesterday's spot, which is kind of odd.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, after things broke right.
So then talk me through, like, say you like this Washington spot and you're going to build out a few different versions of this stack. Like, just give me some, like, obviously by ADP, James Wood is the highest. And then you have all these other infielders. Would you be like, I'm going to have 100% James Wood, and then I'm going to mix and match these infielders behind him? Like, how would you play that out?
Yeah, a lot of it will be positional eligibility. So James Wood is just a really natural fit to pair an outfield with an infielder. I think I would just mix and match the third one a decent amount here. Also handedness, like there's going to be 6 lefties to start this lineup off because there are 2 switch hitters at the top as well. So it is just like a really good spot for Nats in general. And there is some good ISO behind them. I tend to always skew power heavy, Pete. Like in terms of scoring fantasy points, it's like the most direct path to winning is power laden. So I would take like some of the guys with the highest ISO against right-handed. Fuck, there goes another one of our stacks. I was just about to say we could start building Oakland. Let's build contrarian Oakland anyways.
Okay.
Let's take Lawrence Butler. I don't actually no. Let's take Shea Langeliers. Yeah, there we go.
Wait, how do you spell his last? Quick, you got to spell for me, brother.
Oh, Shea.
Oh man, now we're toast.
Oh,
Now
we're
we're
good. We're
toast. I
good.
did
Okay.
not
Well,
get
we got
the.
Jose Ramirez. We got Jose Ramirez as a one-off here. Yeah, Jumfrey stepped in our lane. Like we're in a lobby where all these guys are fancy play syndrome, just like us, and they're all friends and family. So, Giant stack is gone, which is one I like. Ray's stack is gone, which I like. Athletic stack is gone, which is a contrarian one that I like today. So we're gonna have to get a little funky here. Yeah, Shilly's doing the Rays thing. Let me keep scrolling here. What about Pirates backstack? Is anybody taking O'Neal Cruz yet?
Let's see that we could do this in tribute for Nez. No, he's still available here.
Okay, let's fire that one up there in the queue. Shane Boz is a throw hard, hit hard guy, so he can gas it up, but he can also get hit really hard because he gasses it up.
Isn't this a light double bubble too? Isn't the Tampa Bay pitcher the second highest ADP today?
Second highest ADP that is going to continue to fall over the course of the day because that ballpark is playing pretty nice today for hitting conditions. He opened the slate that high because it's the Pirates and Pirates are scuffling and that sort of deal. I imagine with the hashtag models and what I imagine is going to be a looming pitch count limit as well. He is a very unsafe bet for a quality start and win today, in my estimation. So I think he's going to be a faller, and people are going to get to some contrarian pitchers over him instead.
So at this spot, we talked through the different constructions. What would, obviously we could do a 3-1-1-1. We could do a 3-2. How are you breaking ties in which construction to go with here?
That's where the art comes in instead of the science, Pete. You just go with your effing heart here. Now that being said, we could look at the implied implied team total and run total for all of these and be like, okay, Washington has a 5.6 and Pittsburgh only has a 3.8 or something like that, and be like, okay, obviously it makes sense to tack on a Washington piece here, preferably one that's like slightly more contrarian. So that could be a tiebreaker, but this is the art versus science thing. Historically speaking, the 3-1-1s have played better than 2-2-1s in terms of stacks, but on any given night, it's baseball. So we could add Brian Reynolds to this. He would probably be the best real life hitter to add to it. Or we could go to Washington if you just look up the Nationals there, and you could add whoever you want in terms of Nathaniel Lowe or Josh Bell. Those would be my two indications, or my two. I
like doubling down on the Pitt stuff.
All right,
if we're gonna do Cruz, yeah.
Let's do it. Yeah, we get Brian Reynolds hitting from the left side today, which is slightly more favorable than where he was at the other day.
Nice. All right, let's do one more since this one was marred in an auto pick controversy here. We can get one clean one. Yeah, it's not like NFL where my fingers can immediately know how to spell all of these
It's
names.
True. I should have been more mindful of that.
All right, we got a 1-6-1-7. I'm out of it today. A 1-6-2-1. Pick 6 and 7 here for our third team drafted today. We are drafting in the turn Tuesday, $7 entry, 144 entries. Do we have some sickos who max MLBs? Bro, I think you're muted, John. I can't hear you.
Sorry. Yeah, I'm just coughing like crazy today. My bad. Yeah, we definitely do. We definitely got the Sam Olsons of the world. We got the Brad BRDMCs of the world. We got some dudes like Jay Witt and Tomato who are kind of auto bros, 1-4-4s and 5-man stacks they fire up. Chris is in here all the damn time. I'm not sure if he maxes, but he comes pretty close. But yeah, it's a big endeavor. And this has been kind of like the evergreen debate for us in terms of how you size these contests, because it is such a hand builder's, hand drafter sport. And you're trying to do the legwork of an entire week of NFL, but in a day, right? And sometimes multiple slates in a day, coupled with the hand building labor of it. So how big can these contests get? I hope we can get to 50K, but I think it's going to be really hard to rival that of hoops because of the auto draft nature and the position list limit. Because even me with baseball, like 5 at a time is a lot. because you're trying to think of your pivots, and then you didn't
Yeah.
see who somebody else suggested or selected or something like that. Yeah, but in terms of positionless, I don't think that's the best way to play baseball either. So if it benefited fill rates, I'm not even sure it's ideal for us.
All right, we got the turn.
Yeah, Bobby Witt, I have projecting quite high for me today. Could set up a nice little infield stack with him that I like. And then we could do the Oakland thing that I was trying to get ahead of there. So we could do Bobby Witt, and then we could do let's do Brent Rooker.
Okay. All right, Bobby Witt. God, look at MLB. You love it. ADP of 6.8 at pick 6 and ADP of 34.9 at pick 7.
Yeah.
Is MLB the ultimate scroll the F down sport? It doesn't seem like anything can rival it, because even in NFL, you'd be hemorrhaging if you pulled up a 34 guy at pick 7 in one of your drafts.
Yeah, it's definitely MLB, and it's not close. Some people will try and tell you that it's golf, but golf is pretty stagnant for the first 2.5 rounds, and then you can click whoever you want. People don't tend to just click whoever they want in the second round in golf quite like they do in baseball on an 11 gamer like this. Because I mean, the guy that we just selected, Pete, he hit 300 last year. He hit almost 40 home runs. Like he's a stud, and he was going undrafted some percentage of the time, right?
Yeah. I had kind of asked this question in our first draft, but we can let Vinny re-ask it again. Why not wait for the A stack and do 2 studs up top, 1-1-3?
Because then you just play into ownership of studs up top, and studs all the time will just go goose eggs on a day, or they'll put up like 8 fantasy points and not break a slate. There are quote unquote studs all over the board, or guys who like projection is so relative. It's not kind of like football where, Derrick Henry is always going to project higher than Rico Dowdle, for instance. It's not as clean as that, pending the source that you look at or pending where you go. Like some places will tell you, Brent Rooker projects even better than Bobby Witt does, and now that maybe that's a little far-fetched on a day like today, but it will be true on other days, right?
Yeah. And like you said, if most people are using that as their cheap backstack, then all those teams are going to look the same. And you're essentially kind of flipping the board and saying, I'll get a different type of stack with this. And that way, if I'm right, I'm competing against far less. All right. We're on the clock.
Type in low for me, or Lau. There you go. Let's take Brandon Lau as a one-off here. This is another way to get contrarian with your contrarian stack. Instead of taking like Mookie Betts with Bobby Witt, I'm going to take a guy who projects just as well as Mookie Betts for me right now, and that's Brandon Lau. And then we'll go ahead and we'll add another athletic here. We'll go with our guy Shea Langeliers.
Did I type that in right? Oh, there he is. Yep. Okay, let's make sure we get him this time. We got it.
There we go. I love playing right-handed power from the Athletics in particular against left-handed guys who struggle with right-handed power, that being Justin Steele. Justin Steele's a good pitcher, but that ballpark plays very favorably, and yeah.
How efficient would you say this pitcher ADP is?
Today, it's fine. It's I would say on a day-to-day basis, it's probably like the guys who are pushed up are guys that are not in great spots today. They're just high strikeout rate guys, and strikeouts are floor, and we want that. So Chris Sale is, my SP2. He's some people's SP3 today. King is fine, but he's going up against a lineup that doesn't strike out a whole lot. So I think it should be like Gilbert, Sale, King, Webb, Steele, Burns, Casey Mize, who goes undrafted, should be up there. I think that's kind of how I would rank it today in my sheet. So it's close to efficient. Like the right names are there. It's just kind of nitpicking the order of them.
All right, we need a pitcher and an outfielder here to round out this squad.
Mm-hmm.
You want Sale?
Yeah, I like Sale. I mean, obviously Dodgers are so effing tough. I think we should. I think we should just take James Wood here, because if we go 3-man athletics stack here, you're dealing with Lawrence Butler, who presumably is going to lead off versus the lefty, but is not a given. Could be a nice spot for a rest day, and then we'll be dealing with some swap to like Andujar or someone who's like just a guy that we don't want to play. I really like the James Wood spot, and the 2-man Oakland plus a Scrolly F down and in Brendan Lau, like this feels contrarian enough to get it done.
I was gonna say, John, I don't see any 2-1-1-1s on the stack type notes here, brother.
The other ones that we kind of glossed over are 2-2-1 and 2-1-1-1. Those are, they're fine, but their win rates will play better on shorter slates. So their win rates will play better on like a 6-gamer or a 5-gamer than on a full-fledged 11-gamer. But yeah.
Okay. All right, that's John, you got to know the rules before you can break the rules here.
It's true. It is true.
You mentioned that in your style, are you aggregating projections? Are you somehow making your own? You made it sound like you kind of are doing your own thing.
This is one of the few sports that I do. I do tend to do my own thing on days in which I play. I will aggregate. I will mix and match, and I didn't do it as much last year. I used to do it 2 summers ago, a decent amount, just because I really enjoy it, to be fair. But last year, Easy did such a good job of it on his site that I was very reliant on that, and then would just tweak it ever so slightly. But yeah, the crux of it all is, weather, lineup spot, historical information, bad X, like that. It's all some hybrid of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
How much news hounding do you have to do for MLB stuff, or is like the projections and the news blurbs on Underdog going to get you most of the way there?
It'll get you most of the way there. You got to be mindful of like day games after night games, or guys who got banged up that they won't be in the lineup the following day. Like yesterday was a really big miss by the entire community until I said it on the show with the Jose Ramirez there, where he had a Q tag. He was going in the 30s. He homers in his first at bat after that. Like he was in the winning lineup, like that sort of deal, where it was like, it was a good spot for him, and B, he was made available to pinch hit on Sunday. They just didn't need him to do so. And there's like a little nugget that would be way more commonplace in football. Like almost everyone would have known that. They would have been like, oh, he wasn't at practice on the last day, his hamstring, blah, 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 but he'll be good to go kind of deal. Whereas in baseball, it's a little more ambiguous, where the note just says, hey, X-rays came back negative, but he still has the Q tag, and everybody saw him sit out Sunday. So they didn't know if he was an IL candidate or not kind of deal.
Gotcha. Are there swaps for Q tags in MLB?
Yep, absolutely. Works the exact same way as any other sport. Also, for players who do not end up in the starting lineup. So if you're drafting, who was a good example? Freddie Freeman. Freddie Freeman yesterday, people were kind of on the fence that would he come back to play or not after some weird injury stuff. And then apparently an unreported thing until game time was that he tripped and fell in the shower or something at home and tweaked his ankle. That's already his bad ankle, and he was a scratch right before game time. So then he receives an out tag there, and then you just get a swap. So if a guy who's anticipated to be in the lineup but then doesn't end up in the lineup, you do get a swap as well.
It just makes it tough because you have to do those swaps on a global level, and the player you're probably swapping to, like, you want to make that team specific based on your stacks.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like even more so than NFL, where it's like, anyone who was taking Freeman likely had him paired with Mookie Betts or with Ohtani or, that sort of deal, because he's not a guy, he goes at the front end of draft boards, but he's not a guy that people tend to gravitate using as a one-off either. He's usually used in a stack. So yeah, it does make the global stack stuff. You don't really want to ape Q tags in baseball because there's no real like benefit to it. Like at lock, like maybe you get someone hitting in the 3-hole instead of the 6-hole, and it's like there's no CLV there. It's like, oh, he gained like 0.2 at bats and a slightly better like RBI equity. Like there's no CLV. It's not like NBA where it's like, oh, Chet Holmgren gets ruled out, Hartenstein 30 plus minutes and gets a projection boost that's 10 points. Like that doesn't really exist in baseball.
So it sounds like if I wanted to start dipping my toes in and making lineups that, let's just say they don't even have to be plus EV. Let's just say they're break even lineups. They're not bad lineups. Mm-hmm. To me, it sounds like my best path would be to focus on 3-2s. So I'm just, or 4-1s or 5-0s, where I'm just focusing on one team or two teams. And I am kind of leaning into like the double bubble stuff a little bit. Look at the pitchers at the top and try to play some contrarian angles, be willing to lose, but knowing if I hit, I'll be going against not too many lineups. Would you say that is my best path, or would you have another piece of advice for me?
I would say it's pretty close to your best path. I would say the double bubble notion has to be a very specific set of circumstances.
Okay.
Like doing it against Logan Gilbert tonight probably ain't it. Like it's a really, really tough ballpark to hit in, despite their ability to score runs last night. Like doing it against Glasnow last night, I thought was just flat dumb. Like because there are these outliers in terms of pitching that they are just so far on the pendulum of excellence, plus in such good spots, plus in such good weather conditions that like why? Like we don't have to, right? Like we don't have to. Just because nobody is doing it doesn't mean we have to do it, right? So if there's a shakier version of an SP1 on a slate or a more volatile version, then I would advocate for doing it. That being said, like Logan Gilbert and Glasnow are probably not those dudes, right? So the archetype of the double bubble really does matter to me. Like a guy like Blake Snell, for instance, you could do it against Blake Snell. And now on the surface, people will see projection, and Blake Snell and Tyler Glasnow will be projected almost identically if they were starting for the Dodgers today against a good lineup, because they're both high strikeout rate guys. The biggest glaring difference is Snell has a propensity to have control issues, whereas Glasnow does not. And that leads to runners on base, which means one swing can amount to 4 or 5 runs instead of just a 3 or 4 runs instead of just a solo home run there. And that's when you can break a slate wide open. So I think the profile of SP1 matters in a big way in terms of the double bubble leverage.
Okay. I appreciate any other, because the double bubble angle for me was a really easy way to shortcut having to know a lot of stuff. Do you have any other shortcut tricks for me? If I'm not going to know that there's fucking 2 switch hitters and one guy's a pinch hit risk, and there's like a 3.2 degree easterly wind inside Coors Field, help me, John.
I think if you stay within, I genuinely believe in baseball, Pete, that you can play anybody because you do not have to be optimal to win, right? Nobody drafted Carson Kelly on the main slate yesterday, period. Like no one, not a single soul. And he was the guy who won the night slate for Chris. So I think if you're just willing to accept the binary outcomes of like, I'm just going to lose this $5 or this $5 could be $1,000 or whatever, you just really have to ape into that understanding of it. And then you just have to build out contrarian stacks and just be like, this team goes nuke, rest of the slate stays kind of muted. These are the guys you needed kind of deal. So I do think staying within the parameters of stacking is probably just the 1-0-1. And then in terms of like shortcut for pitching, it'd probably be just don't stack the best pitcher on the slate with your contrarian stacks because someone else is going to do it.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
On, Consigliere saying look for 3, 4, 5 hitters, 1, 2, 3. What is the best? Is it that resource site that you talked about for just seeing lineups? What's the best place to find those?
Yeah, Fangraphs roster resource is pretty spot on. Roto Grinders with their starting lineups tool is pretty spot on. It's very similar to basketball where you're going to nitpick like, oh, that's not going to happen tonight and that matchup's not going to be there or this person's going to get a rest day. So you can definitely bro science it a little bit, but in terms of like just baseline entry level, that's really good. As soon as the lineups get posted on the Underdog Twitter, though, they do appear in the app. So if you're going to draft at lock, you don't even need external resources because the little number of their lineup position will be right there for you.
Where the green check was?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Okay, that's cool.
where the green check is for hitters, that will appear in your app, like batting 2 and batting 4 or whatever.
But that in what is the are they required? Is there a rule of when they have to? Is it like an hour before first pitch or what?
I off the top of my mind, I don't definitively know what the rule is. I did at one point. I'll go back and look it up, but yeah, it's about like, 45 minutes to first pitch kind of thing, 35 minutes to first pitch, something like that.
Yeah. So like
Yeah.
you're saying, there's maybe
It's
like
like
a very small edge if the lineup gets tinkered and you're able to kind of like pair a 1, 2, 3 or 3, 4, 5 that the field wasn't for the rest of the day.
Yeah, the biggest thing is like catchers who hit in the middle of the order who receive an off day, because generally speaking, catchers will only play 5 out of 7, like that sort of deal in a week. So, yeah, like a guy like Will Smith, where guys will be doing chalk Dodger stack all day, and now all of a sudden he's out, and Michael Conforto, who was supposed to be hitting 8 or 9, is now in the 4 hole, and it's like, oh yeah, well, shit, we should have got a little bit of that. Or yesterday, Dodgers, Andy Pajes had like an out tag all day, and then all of a sudden he just ends up hitting 9th, and it was like, oh, I'm gonna do a couple cheeky Andy Pajes stacks because he's 0% owned right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I feel like I got a good primer now, and now the only question is, do I get the bug like I did with hoops here? I'm certainly intrigued. I'm excited to watch some of your guys' shows, try to learn via osmosis along the way. I was, maybe 1 foot in, 1 foot out, and then Davis was saying how much it would tilt him if I do good at this, and so now I feel like I want to be all in. Anything that can lead to further Davis tilt is the bulletin board material that I need. Any other programming notes for the Badge Bros this week?
Yeah, for sure. I was gonna do hoops right after this today, but honest to God, guys, you can hear it in my voice. I just feel like shit right now. And I'm a little underprepared for the hoop stuff, but we'll run it back tomorrow. We will do what we did on Monday tomorrow, but we will flip the order in which we did it. We will do forward facing NBA tomorrow, courtesy unabated, in our normal time slot at 2 p.m. Eastern. And then we will double back on paywall MLB after that. Going to be a short MLB slate tomorrow. It's the main slate is primarily all night games, and it's a classic Wednesday getaway day there. And then on Thursday, we'll do forward facing, both of them for everyone there. And then Friday, TBD. I think we might do a football draft, but honest to God, it's going to depend on how I feel. And then I think I'm going to mix in a little something this weekend because Nikki's on a girls trip. Puck just kind of ended, and I'm going to be kind of bored, I think. So I think I'll mix in a couple badges only on the weekend, maybe 1 or 2.
There you go. There you go. You need to find what's the equivalent of your nose strip, Nez. You need some kind of prop.
I think people would like lip tape, John. That would be a great stream. That'd be a great stream for people that they would actually enjoy.
It needs to have alliteration. I think I got it. There's no strip Nez. Hear me out. Jockstrap John. Drafting dailies and nothing but his jockstrap. Talk about a value add for the community.
I mean, hunting dongs takes on a whole new meaning when it comes to the baseball streams with Jockstrap John. I actually did see that Emo Cowboy had his shirt off yesterday on a stream. So
that's called a Tuesday. That's not a special event. All right. Check out those shows. I think next week on Off and on the Clock, I want to do another dance related show. Check in on some updates since we last talked about that. Some other kind of, shuffling in the playoff picture. It feels like, correct me if I'm wrong, it feels like we have a few more kind of like dark horse candidates that we could sprinkle in that we didn't feel comfortable with at this point last time.
Oh, absolutely. The Bulls are looking frisky as hell right now. Like I'm not sure they have enough to beat the Celtics or something if they do win the play-in, but my God, they look frisky. So yeah, there's definitely some teams or some push through components, especially the way like Josh Giddey's playing right now, that you can just tack on at the end of your drafts there. And then there's also been like some big time like fallers, like the Magic look defeated right now. That Pacers versus Magic versus Knicks debate that we were having earlier is definitely, flip-flopping, snip snap, that sort of deal there. Yeah, I mean, that Lakers stuff aged like gold though, Pete. The stuff we were talking about pushing up, LeBron and Luka and pairing them together, that stuff aged quite well there. So yeah, definitely some dance stuff. One other thing that I'm looking into for next week is some albatross stuff as well. Yeah, might have something in particular for the paywall crowd, albatross related next week as well, because the Masters start on Thursday. So if you guys want to get your albatross stuff in, reminder that it's only the majors in that contest, so we don't have to be through and through sickos to enter that one. We will know most of the player pool because it is a major. So yeah, another one that I'm looking into for next week.
For me, I was out sick yesterday, so I bailed on Best Ball Breakfast, but I'm going to run that tomorrow at 10 a.m. So normal time, just a Wednesday edition. Get back in the Best Ball streets. Other programming this week. Lowell's Chris Spags is joining us. We're going to do a little kind of behind the scenes content stuff. Talk with him about what happened with his startup that he was working on. Gretch is going to return to ship chasing on Thursday. Davis is out. Gretch is going to fill right back in. I think we're going to talk about some of our dream fits for the NFL draft and what that would mean for fantasy. And then I'm having Thor Nystrom on from Fantasy Life on After Dark on Friday. I had Friedman on last week, so going to keep the good times rolling with the draft crew over at Fantasy Life. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of your week. We'll see you back here with Nez on Off and On the Clock next Tuesday, his big return to the program. And yeah, good luck in the MLB streets. We'll see you guys next time.